Welcome to CrystalMaker 10. In this tour, I want to say something about atomic radii and colours. Here we have a ball and stick model of a simple organic molecule, and the atoms are clearly not being plotted at their correct relative sizes. They're being plotted at a smaller size, which is the ball and stick radius, and this is a percentage of the space-filling radius of the atom. Now, this is one of the things that you can customize using the inspector. So let's just navigate to the model inspector, and we're going to go down to the group that says sphere and bond radii, and here we have ball and stick spheres, 40% of space filling. We have a disclosure button here which we can click to display a popover, and you can adjust the fraction of the space filling radius, and you can also specify a minimum radius. For example, if you have some tiny atoms, maybe hydrogen, you don't want them to disappear completely in a ball and stick model. So you can specify a minimum size. Now, why is this important? It's not just about the visibility of the atoms, it's also about the visibility of the bonds. All of the bonds that are drawn on the screen are drawn at a constant diameter, which is a percentage of the minimum sphere size. So if your smallest sphere is microscopic, then your bonds are going to be almost invisible. So it's important to get this right. So that's for ball and stick radii. Now, what about the actual absolute radii, the space-filling radii for our atoms? Well, let's go to the atoms inspector. Here you can see a list of all of the elements in our structure, and in the fifth column along we have the radii given. You can actually expand these groups and show the individual sites, but we're just concerned with the elements here. So you can edit the values for a particular structure just by double clicking on a radius value and typing in something bigger. You can also change the radii by applying a preset table of atomic radii. And you can do that by moving up to the Actions menu, and you'll notice that there is a radii submenu. Now, this includes a set of different tables of atomic radii, including covalent, atomic, van der Waals, and ionic radii. So if I were to choose some ionic radii, you can see as suddenly carbon becomes very, very small. If I were to make this a space-filling plot, you could see how ludicrous this looks. For this type of plots, it's probably useful to use a set of van der Waals radii, and then one gets a good idea of the interaction volume of the molecule. But for a ball and stick plot, maybe the covalent radii work, and we have a set of radii SAR here, which works very nicely indeed. So it would be nice to be able to just have one set of default radii, which would work with everything, but unfortunately the radius of an atom varies dramatically according to its bonding state and its charge. And for that reason, it's sometimes useful to be able to switch between the different tables. Now, you can set a preference, and this will depend on the type of structures that you work with. By default, CrystalMaker is shipped with a set of ionic radii, the Shannon and Pruitt crystal ionic radii, and they work very well for most inorganic structures. But if you regularly work with covalent structures, then we recommend that you use a set of covalent radii as your default set, because the bonding generation uses the sum of atomic radii, then it's going to be important that your values are correct. Now, how do we do this? We do this with the Preferences command. On the Mac, we go up to the CrystalMaker menu, go down to Preferences, and on the Windows, you'll use the Edit menu. Now, we have an Elements tab here. The Elements tab shows you the current set of radii. And as you can see, our default set has carbon at 0.29 angstroms. That's the ionic radius of carbon, which is a trifle small for a covalently bonded structure. You can use the pop-up menu here to switch to different tables. Here we've got atomic radii. Here we've got van der Waals radii. And you can edit any of these values by clicking on the atom and entering a new radius value, and you can also change the color using a color wheel. Once you've customized this table, it is your default table, it'll be saved in your preferences and used when you create a new structure. Please note that existing structures use the values saved in their document. That preserves the contents of the document. The document will never be overwritten by changing your defaults. We also have a list view here, which some users may find easier for editing. It's easier to search for things. I should note at this stage that you can export your element data to a text file, and you can import element data from a text file. This is the CrystalMaker element format. If we go down to the bottom of this list view, we have an actions button, and if we click that, we have the ability to import or export data. So if you have a favorite set of atomic radii and colors, then you can save that as a text file and import that. That might be a useful way of preserving data from one version of the program to the next. It allows you to also switch between different sets of your own tables of data if you need to do that. So we have series of default tables of atomic, ionic, covalent van der Waals radii, which you can switch between and which you can assign as your default tables.